Respect. One of the simplest ways of showing it is by simply returning a person's phone call. At the Glenn Armentor Law Corporation, we not only return every call, we also take whatever time is necessary to make sure you completely understand your personal injury case and what it will take to win it. Respect. Deserve. The Glenn Armentor Law Corporation, where a fair settlement is no accident.
Good evening and welcome to Blue Mondays. Blue Mondays is where we take a look at national, state, and local news through a progressive perspective. On this week's show, we've got a jam-packed episode for you. First off, our major interview that we have this week is with Carolyn Woolsey. She is a resident of Lake Charles, and she brings us some great information. She currently serves on several different boards and is currently looking at how Louisiana can actually improve itself so that we can move on into the future, so that we're better prepared to handle the issues that we're dealing with now. Coastal wetlands, improving hurricane structures over there, especially after the devastation that we saw in Cameron Parish. So a lot of really good information that you'll want to stay tuned for. But first, as always, this week in the news. Supporting our troops. Dana Priest filed a report with MSNBC, and Keith Olbermann takes a look at the inside happenings at Walter Reed. That is where a lot of our injured men and women that are returning home from the war front over in Iraq and Afghanistan, this is where most of those individuals are then being going to for therapy, physical therapy, and trying to improve their lives. This is oftentimes after they have had very serious brain injuries or also the loss of limbs. Dana Priest takes a look inside of what's going on, and here is the look at what's going on.
Tucked away in a northwest Washington neighborhood is a former hotel the Army simply calls Building 18. It's an unlikely place to house injured soldiers in the nation's capital. But the respected Walter Reed Army Medical Center, just across the street, is overflowing with the wounded from 5 years of war in Afghanistan and Iraq. So for some of the 700 outpatients, Building 18 is now home. Walter Reed clinical social worker Joe Wilson.
So they had to do a quick renovation, which was very quick and very cursory, that didn't necessarily address all of the issues that you'd want to address if you were building a barracks.
Many soldiers living here are being treated for brain injuries and psychological stress. They've been promised the best the nation can provide.
We owe them all we can give them.
But, as a Washington Post investigation found, conditions here are far from ideal. Mold and peeling wallpaper, shower rot, mice and cockroaches. Walter Reed staff members and outpatients told the Post that conditions here at Building 18 are symptomatic of a system overwhelmed by more injured soldiers than the Pentagon expected. Small matters can become huge obstacles to injured servicemen trying to recover. Marine Sergeant Ryan Groves lost a leg when a rocket-propelled grenade exploded near him in Fallujah.
You know, we're missing legs, arms, brain injuries.
For Groves and others, reporting to a supervisor meant an awkward trek around 3 buildings. He says there's a ramp that would shorten the trip, but it's too steep. Filling a prescription requires an even longer trip. Psychiatric treatment is clear across post. And at the end of the day, a long trip home uphill. But his larger complaint is that his military supervisors didn't treat him like a patient.
They made me feel like on a regular basis, like I was being a lazy, weak, poor excuse for a Marine.
Soldiers can tend to feel disenfranchised from the system. They begin to resent the system. They'll withdraw. They'll not seek out services.
No one is complaining about the quality of medical care at Walter Reed. Most say it's top-notch. But 65% of the troops polled by the hospital last March said their experience as outpatients had been stressful. As for Building 18, Army officials told us they started an aggressive campaign to deal with the mice infestation last October, and it's now at a manageable level. They also say they will review all outstanding work orders in the next 30 days, and they've added more social workers, case managers, and platoon sergeants to better address the needs of outpatients. But for soldiers and Marines trying hard to recover, it's another battlefield, here at home. Dana Priest for NBC News, Washington.
You know, this is really disgusting. It's really outright disgusting. The way that we are treating our brave men and women after they return home, they didn't ask any questions of us when we sent them over there. Whether you want to argue of whether we should be over there or not, that's really irrelevant. The bottom line is these guys served us well. And they then return home thinking that we're going to realize that, well, they've lost a limb and we might not be able to give it back to them. But we should be taking care of them. And the problem is we're not fulfilling that promise. After all, in Bush's latest budget, he wants to cut some $3 billion from the VA. This is after the VA is already looking at huge numbers and huge increases in the number of people that they're going to be serving. It's really disgusting. Why are we not standing up to this? Why is something not being done? Hopefully these new latest media reports, something will be done. Tony Snow, press secretary for the White House, which is a division of Fox News, it would appear these days. Tony Snow said that he knew that the president was aware of the conditions at Walter Reed and what they are currently facing. But then he starts waffling a little bit when the reporters catch him in this. Take a look.
To me a moment ago that the administration was aware of this before the articles appeared in the paper.
That is my understanding. But again, this is something that's an action item over at the Department of Defense and in particular the Department of the Army. I am not fully briefed on the activities or who knew what when, and I suggest...
Was the White House aware of it?
I am not certain when we first became aware of it. Now, the President certainly has been aware of the conditions in the wards where he has visited and visited regularly, and we also have people from Walter Reed regularly over to the White House as guests, sometimes in fairly large numbers.
So my question is, if they did know about this, why is nothing being done? It's unbelievable. He says that the president is committed to these people because he has them over to the White House as guests. You kidding me, right? I'm sure these people would much rather have the prosthetics that they need, that they have a safe place to live, that they can actually get from one appointment to the other. And I don't know, how about treating them with the dignity and respect of a person who basically sacrificed their arm or their leg for this country with no questions asked? Perhaps we should do a little bit more than maybe have them over for tea and crumpets over at the White House. It's unbelievable to me. In continuing in the segment that with Keith Olbermann, he speaks to John Schultz from VoteVets.org. He outlines the problems that are happening across the country. Take a look.
War veteran John Schultz, now chairman of the political action committee, VoteVets.org. John, thanks for your time tonight.
Oh, yes, sir. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Is the Washington Post account of the outpatient conditions at Walter Reed consistent with the accounts you're hearing from around the country?
Well, sir, I think the Washington Post piece, it speaks for itself. Walter Reed is in a specifically, different position than some of the other outpatient places around the United States Army and the Department of Defense. Last year the Republican Congress decided they were going to brack a lot of military installations around the country, which means base realignment and closure. Walter Reed, it came up on that list. So I think, you're seeing the effects of that policy, which is, why are you going to fix the paint and clear the mice out of an institution that's closing? I think the second striking, thing about this piece is that this is actually part of the Department of Defense, that this is not the Veterans Administration, which we know is woefully underfunded. The DOD is responsible, for these soldiers until they leave active duty. So basically the same administration that brought us no body armor and no up-armored Humvees is the same administration that just brought us mice at Walter Reed, and their support for the warfighter is abysmal.
Even if this country had to pay full price at private hospitals so these guys, our neighbors and our friends, could get the care that they need at full price, no insurance, could the cost possibly amount to more than a microscopic fraction of the billions we've seen vanish down the rabbit holes in Iraq?
No, sir, not at all. VoteVets.org, we did this, this big commercial with body armor, and we blew up the body armor, and, it cost me $1,000 on eBay to buy the piece, and when my unit went to Iraq, we were cross-level on plates, we didn't have up-armored Humvees. It took public embarrassment for that. So the tactical equipment, it's actually not that expensive. And what makes this so shocking is the money is there for the Pentagon. They get what they request. They get the supplementals from Congress. So what this is an administration that's dedicated to the high-end corporate contractors, the high-end weapon systems in the sky, the super-duper missile defense systems that alienate our allies. These are the same people that are making $40 million a year in their corporate contracts. And that money's coming into the political system on one side. And one of the really things we do at vote vets as we try to fight for the warfighter. And, you know, in this specific case, there's no reason why we can't spend, you know, the small money on the regular warfighter when we're spending the large money on weapon systems that aren't making a difference on the war on terror.
Where is the protest over this? I mean, we've heard this political nonsense about Iraq veterans being spit on or symbolically spit at, and claims withdrawn, and a huge political hubbub made over this. Where are the Republicans speaking about the treatment of these maimed Americans? And where are the Democrats in their protest on this? Where is that? Why is there no outrage about this extraordinary circumstance?
You know, I think this is a larger issue. A lot of people think supporting the troops right now is putting, you know, a $3 yellow magnet made in Hong Kong on the back of their Hummer and saying they support the troops. So I think, you know, that debate, it's been absent for a long time. People rather flip the channel than deal with the war. You know, as for the Republicans, I mean, they just presented another budget to the, you know, the president just, you know, did a new budget that slams the VA 2 years down the road. It was woefully underfunded last year by $2 billion. As for the Democrats, I think we're seeing movements in this direction. You know, Congressman Murtha's plan here is basically not to let more guys go to Iraq unless they're trained properly, unless they're equipped properly. So this is the first time we're actually seeing oversight from Congress, and I expect to see that. And there's no reason why the President and the Secretary of Defense, who controls this facility, shouldn't have an immediate investigation. And Congress should demand hearings immediately on this, because our troops deserve the best, and they deserve, you know, support that's worthy of the sacrifice they're making in this war.
You know, it's unbelievable to me, sitting here and right now, that to find out from veterans, these are the people who are over there fighting for us, that they still do not have the body armor that they need and that they were promised, that they still do not have the up-armored Humvees to protect them. Not only that, but then again, when they come back because they've suffered injuries because they didn't have this equipment, then they are having to be forced to deal with these types of situations. It's really unbelievable and unconscionable to me. We need to stand up, take a stand for these guys. The votevets.org is definitely growing. You'll want to visit their website at votevets.org. As a matter of fact, here's their recent PSA that they have out right now. Take a look.
Because of Iraq.
Because of Iraq, Osama bin Laden is still a threat.
Because of Iraq, our military is spread too thin.
Because of Iraq, there are more terrorists in the world.
Because of Iraq, America is less secure. So if you see commercials telling you to be afraid of terrorism, remember, it's because of Iraq.
You know, I alluded to it earlier. The Department of Veterans Affairs, or the VA, healthcare system, expects to treat 263,000. That's right, 263,000 veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan. This is more than 3 times what the VA originally projected, and yet the President Bush would like to cut their budget. Already they're not being able to serve the needs of our current veterans that are out there right now, but then they want to cut them back even further. It seems unbelievable to me. The VA healthcare system is reported by the senior officials at the VA to be buckling underneath the growing volume. We definitely have to stand up and do something. Blue Mondays is definitely interested in talking with any of our vets here in the viewing population. We'd love to sit down and talk with you and hear of your stories. If you are interested in doing that, please send me an email at stephen@LafayetteDemocrats.org, or you can call us on our Democratic hotline at 769-7347. We'd like to hear your story and take it to the public if possible. Big Brother is watching. That's right. PBS, the PBS program Now, last Friday reported on the data collection of innocent Americans that's being intercepted and stored. This is not something that's just being reviewed. It's now being stored. And more whistleblowers have now come forward to establish the existence of another secret spy room that AT&T's network has built for the NSA. Definitely some troubling reports here. Online reports show that PBS Now found that the government is intercepting most emails sent domestically, number one. Number two, that AT&T is collecting most emails and sharing them with the government, specifically the NSA. The NSA spy room at AT&T's San Francisco facility is only accessible to the NSA and AT&T employees that have been cleared by the NSA. And lastly, that the device installed in San Francisco is capable of intercepting 10 gigabytes of data per second. Let's explain something to you right there. 10 gigabytes per second. That means that this program could actually go through the entire contents of the Library of Congress in 15 minutes. That's it. 15 minutes. This is definitely some scary stuff. From an outsider, it seems that, AT&T has made quite a lucrative deal here. As you've probably seen in a lot of their commercials, Bell South is now AT&T, and Singular is now AT&T. Didn't we bust all of these bells up just a few years ago? But it seems like they're all getting put right back together again. So much for the Humpty Dumpty analogy there. They're all definitely going right back together. What I guess is most concerning, if you remember from a previous episode that we had here when we were talking with some of our local attorneys, Tommy Gilbo expressed very well that if the question is, well, what do I care if people are reading my emails? I'm not doing anything wrong. Well, the question becomes, now since this stuff is being stored, how easy will it be to be able to be used against you in the future? Oh, I don't know, in a divorce settlement, in child custody disputes, and maybe trying to ascertain where you go and what websites you visit. This is definitely some concerning information that we don't want, and it's time that we should do something about it. Definitely some scary stuff. PBS's Frontline exposes Bush's media manipulation. Frontline goes behind the scenes and outlines exactly how the Bush administration has clearly influenced the way the media has been portraying all of the information since Bush took office. Obviously, when things started and really went downhill was shortly after 9/11 and the march up to war, that all of the different news services, and mind you, I'm using air quotes around news. These news services were basically leaning up, but they were obviously drinking from the same trough or from the same Kool-Aid that the president was providing. This is a chilling report that every American really must watch. Here is a clip from Frontline just this past week. Take a look.
But the Bush administration was also helped by the nation's leading newspapers.
It's important to understand that the number of news organizations that actually have a national security reporter or bureaus overseas and can penetrate the intelligence community are very limited. And the New York Times is at the top of that list. So when the New York Times began to have stories that supported the administration's claims about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, it had an echo effect. It had an echo effect that the administration was conscious of and employed.
What specifically has he obtained?
We now know that you had people talking to key reporters doing these stories for the Times.
There's a story in the New York Times this morning. This is, and I want to attribute the Times. I don't want to talk about.
Those stories would appear, and then they would reference the very material that they'd given them and say, see, this is coming from the New York Times, not just us.
The kinds of tubes that are necessary to build a centrifuge, and the centrifuge is required to take low-grade uranium and enhance it into highly enriched uranium.
It was a kind of a loop, and it was a conscious loop.
A lot of people wrote, stories that were, I think, overly credulous.
Tom, you have one of the most riveting.
Bill Keller took over as executive editor of the New York Times after the run-up to the Iraq War.
It wasn't some kind of sense of overdeveloped patriotism or an eagerness on the part of reporters to ingratiate themselves with the White House. What it was, reporters want to get on the front page. They want scoops.
So let's make this clear, looking at just this segment that we brought you, okay? Cheney and his staff pitched a story to the New York Times, okay? They called up the New York Times and said, hey, we've got a story for you, but don't use my name. So some top-level government official is reporting this information. So it's basically unsourced. Well, then they don't double-check the information. They turn around, and Dick Cheney then goes on Meet the Press and other Sunday morning talk shows, and then cites the very same article that he pitched as proof that it's happening. It's unbelievable the spin that was going on to this. And this is only one illustration. I would strongly recommend that you do a search online and find out when PBS's Frontline will be re-airing this program. It's definitely something that you will want to take a look at. It's definitely very scary. McCain, the new flip-flopper in chief. Boy, you know, it seemed so quickly that they labeled John Kerry the flip-flopper, but boy, McCain is flip-flopping at a pace that really scares the tar out of me. Media Matters takes a look into McCain's flip-flop that doesn't seem to be getting much coverage. Here's a quick look into the recent historical clips put together by Media Matters. Take a look.
John McCain says he wants Roe v. Wade overturned. He said pretty explicitly last time he ran, I think it was in '99, that he didn't want it overturned. Social conservatives don't trust him. I think part of that is a little bit unfair, personally. Will this help him at all with the evangelicals he needs, do you think?
Sure, well, because evangelicals and the social conservatives don't trust Romney. They don't trust Giuliani for good reason, and Romney for good reason, and they don't. So I think it's going to help him. He's de-demonizing himself. He's making himself acceptable, you know, not embraceable.
Let me just make one quick point on McCain.
Syndrome. The further he was away from things, the higher he went. But he got back in, right back down.
I'll tell you, these guys are doing more flip-flops in the Republican side than anything I've ever seen. You might remember that in New Hampshire, there was a little problem with McCain when he was asked by a reporter about what he would do if his daughter got pregnant.
I was sitting literally next to him when he said that.
And he said, well, it's up to her, and, you know, you have to look at it. And the boy, everybody went crazy. The social conservatives went crazy. He had to try to explain it. And that was leading into South Carolina, which I think hurt him greatly. And you're right, he's changing his views.
This weekend, another crucial issue for McCain and conservatives, abortion.
How do you feel about overturning Roe versus Wade? I do not support Roe v. Wade. It should be overturned.
McCain lost South Carolina to George W. Bush in 2000, in part because pro-life voters considered Bush more reliably anti-abortion. Though McCain then and now maintains a pro-life voting record, he gave pro-life voters doubt when he said this to the San Francisco Chronicle in August of 1999. In the short term, or even in the long term, I would not support repeal of Roe versus Wade, which would force X number of women in America to undergo illegal and dangerous operations. The quote created an immediate pro-life backlash. McCain said he misspoke. 5 days later, McCain reversed himself, telling the Des Moines Register, I have always believed in the importance of the repeal of Roe versus Wade, and as president, I would work toward its repeal.
So here we are in this day and age where every time a politician or really anybody says anything, it is recorded. Now the guy's going back and trying to have it both ways. Obviously, as the Republicans do during their presidential primaries, they run very far to the right, and then once the primary's over, then they run back to the left. It seems unbelievable to me. This is definitely something that's going to be haunting him, and not very many people are caring too much for the straight talk express anymore. That's for sure. In our clip of the week, Jon Stewart takes a look at the coverage over Anna Nicole's death. You know, it seems unbelievable to me, the amount of time that CNN and NBC, ABC, and all of these supposed news sources are actually spending on this tragic, yes, but really, is it newsworthy so much so that it gets more coverage than the President's State of the Union address? I don't know. Let's see what John has to say. Take a look.
Now, you remember last week a female astronaut with a very accomplished resume was arrested for the attempted murder of her romantic rival. A good time was had by all. Now, a lot of attention was paid to the story, but on Thursday, the media came to its senses.
Well, there's breaking news now on Fox News Channel. Fox News has just confirmed that Anna Nicole Smith has died.
Anna Nicole Smith, dead at 39.
Just updating our viewers, we have now confirmed from the hospital in Hollywood, Florida, she has passed away. She's dead.
Move over, crazy astronaut in diapers. The media unleashed a full-scale coverage orgy with CNN at one point going 90 minutes without a commercial, making the death of Anna Nicole Smith a more significant news event than a State of the Union address and slightly less than 9/11.
Great work, John. That was another clip of the week. I think you're actually beating out Stephen Colbert in our clips of the week, so good job. And that is your progressive news for this past week. You want to check us out online. Guess what? All of our shows are now online and available at our YouTube page. That's youtube.com/AOC Blue Mondays. There you'll be able to take a look at all of our previous episodes and maybe perhaps make your own little mix. You can select which ones you'd like to view and set it all up, and you'll be able to watch them online. Also, we'd like to remind you that on Tuesday mornings, you can curl up with your cup of coffee and click on over to the Daily Advertiser's website. There you'll be able to read my weekly column called The Left Blog. There I'm taking a look at right now in a continuing series where I'm looking at the elections that we're all going to be faced with come this fall. Definitely something you'll want to check out. And also, you want to visit our friends over at the Lafayette Democrats website. Their site is LafayetteDemocrats.org. There you can see their calendar and what's going on with them. Last but most certainly not least, we want to remind you that Democracy Now! Is on AOC Channel 16 every single weekday at 11 a.m. and 11 p.m. Amy Goodman and friends take a look at the unembedded news reports that are coming out from all over the country, well, really all over the world. They do an amazing job over there at bringing you unbiased, uncorporatized media. They do a great job. You definitely want to check them out. So after you're done watching us tonight, you can click on over and watch your late local news, and then you can flip on over to AOC Channel 16, and there you'll be able to watch Amy Goodman tonight at 11 p.m. Don't forget that. And with that, we'll be right back.
Global warming. Some say irreversible consequences are 30 years away. 30 years? That won't affect me.